Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today is Friday, July 29th. Today, we are back with another amazing story that will inspire you. I am so excited to welcome to the Stories That Inspire Us podcast, attorney Lynn Catalano. Welcome, Lynn. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Me too. I'm excited.
Wonderful. I want to chat a little bit about your introduction. You know, sometimes there's so much I want to say right off the bat, but I would obviously like to share that you are the author of the book, Wrecking Ball Relationships: How to Identify, Live With, or Leave the Narcissist in Your Life. Wow. Start us off by telling us a little bit about your journey to write your book, because that's really the basis of your inspiring story.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm going to give you a theme of when you get lemons in life, you make lemonade. And I'm sure that many of your stories have that recurring theme. But with me, I grew up in what I thought was pretty idyllic childhood. I didn't see any flaws because my mother was really good about protecting what I saw. And I'm an only child, and she passed away very suddenly at age 66. She was not ill. She had not been sick. She was not in an accident. And she passed away in 3 days. So it was very much a shock to me and to my family. But then over the next year, I tried desperately to pull my father into our family. At the time, I had a young family. I had 2 small daughters and a husband. And I wanted to pull him in because, number one, that's what I thought you were supposed to do. And I wanted him to be part of our family. And over that next probably 5, 6, 7 years, I realized that things were not what they seemed. And I had no idea what was happening. And as anyone who experiences this knows, when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, their intention is to create chaos and confusion. And so I was lost. I was grateful that I had an incredible support network. I had my husband and some wonderful friends that were there for me. I sought counseling. I went to therapy. And all the time, my education and my law degree teaches me that we research things when we don't know what's happening. And so I set out to research, what was this? And I started Googling my father's symptoms, which is now what I tell my clients is a huge red flag. If you're Googling someone's symptoms, wow. You should know this is like a bright flashing light, okay? Trying to tell you something. But in the meantime, I was writing down what was happening just as a form of catharsis for me. I was not planning on writing a book. I was just writing down what was happening, knowing that 2 + 2 did not equal 4, and all the while researching all of the science behind narcissistic personality disorder, because that's what came up when I Googled his symptoms. And I kept learning more, and I kept talking to other people who I was so surprised would have a similar experience in their lives. And so in 2020, I started writing it down and organizing it into a book form. I wanted to create the resource guide that I was looking for during that time period. So here we are. When I did finally write the book, though, I interviewed many, many other people because I didn't want it to just be about my story. I wanted it to be about people who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder in all forms. So I spoke to people who it was their romantic partner, it was their husband or wife, it was their sibling or their friend. And then I spoke to other people who it was their parent, mother or father. And I think that that allows readers to really get a full picture and to be able to relate to things. I also interspersed a lot of pop culture references because I believe that's where we find commonality through movies and TV and music, you know, and we can relate to that. And I had no idea there was so much narcissistic references around in pop culture, but I think I found quite a few. So
Wow. One of my first questions that's popping into my head was, so you're on this path, you're on this journey, you see this type of behavior, things were not adding up for you. When you were hit with the realization that it was your father who was, I have a hard time saying that, narcissist.
yes.
How did that relate to your childhood? Because as you said, your mother protected you. Did you feel maybe upset, maybe some anger, confusion with your mom, even though she's not here anymore?
I have a lot of questions for her. I really do. And the more that I learned, the more questions I have. So, you know, you look back at life with a different filter when you learn all these new things.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously hindsight is 2020. Now I can see all of the instances of his disorder coming out. I mean, we spent many family gatherings at my mother's family where it was not a question of if my father would throw a tantrum, it was when.
Oh.
And, you know, then my mother's crying and my grandmother's crying. And I thought, what is happening? And then he would end up pouting upstairs for the rest of the remainder of the trip. I mean, it was awful. And, you know, I have my mother's brother and sister that I'm very close with. And they fill me in on a lot of things. And you know, my uncle will tell me stories about before I was born. And, you know, he'll tell me that my father was a bully from the time he met him. And narcissists are often bullies, and they often pick on someone that they believe they are above and that they can be superior to. And yeah, I look at things very, very differently now, unfortunately.
So when that was happening as well, it sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there was a lot of denial, it sounds like, for your mom.
Well, you know, I believe that this was an excellent example of codependency. And I think that in a lot of relationships where you're in a relationship with a narcissist, the other person has to make themselves smaller. They have to minimize themselves. And there's something about being needed that really feeds the empath or someone who has a codependency on someone else. So, you know, after, you know, here we are years and years later, but my mother's sister will say to me that my mother needed to be needed. Now it's exhausting. The pumping him up all the time, telling him how great he was and how smart he was and how could that organization ever do anything without you? I mean, you are so incredible, and on and on and on, exhausting.
And what was your mother's siblings' response to all that? Did they ever indicate to you that there was some kind of intervention or different things that maybe that she could do?
No, unfortunately, you know, my mother chose my father every time. And so family interactions, were limited. And I think that they knew that things were difficult when my father was around. So they often opted not to come to something, some milestone at our house. And they all lived out of town. And, but my grandmother would come in because she wanted to be part of whatever it was. And she was willing to deal with my father. But I think they all talked about it. They all knew, you know, many issues came as a result of my father. And it was like, I wasn't aware because here I was a kid.
Right.
But then as a teenager, I realized this is not right. This is not how my mother behaves at my father's family. So, and I think I talked to her about it, but I don't remember because it was such a sensitive subject, you know, even as a teenager, you know what not to talk about, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, did your father's family, did they play into his behavior as well?
Well, here's the fun fact. His siblings, they're all narcissists. So like going to a holiday with them, it was like, and I recognized this really early on as a young teenager, maybe like 12 years old. I said to my mother, gosh, going to a holiday at Dad's side, it's like, enough about me. What do you think of me?
Oh, Lordy.
So like they're always in the shallow end of the conversation, of the relationship. They never ask you how you're doing or what's up with you. They only want to tell you about their latest trip or their promotion or their new car or their new piece of jewelry or whatever it is. So, I mean, it's pretty easy. You could actually go to one of those events and just nod your head, you know?
Right. And I would imagine, I mean, you were very young when you picked up on that. Do you have any contact with your father's side of the family? I would think not.
No, because when things started to happen, so it's been 12 years since my mother passed away. And during that time, my father has gone for years giving me the silent treatment, not having anything to do with my family, my children, nothing. And they would invite me for a holiday, right, with my family. And so I would say to them, you know, it's not comfortable. Like, I'm not comfortable going somewhere. They had a very small house where my father's going to be. And they'd say, well, we invite everyone because we don't care who's having an argument. We don't get in the middle of anything. We just invite everyone. Well, that's very nice. But it's really high anxiety for me to go to an event where I know my father's going to be. And I'm not really interested. And then they stopped talking to us. So,
Wow.
yeah. So we don't have any contact.
And that's sad on so many different levels. You know, I have somebody in my family and there's no exchange there. So I can certainly personally relate to that and to some of that behavior. And I'm just wondering, so you're keeping these notes, obviously very intuitive, being an attorney and the research that went into this, and then it's like I can see you sitting at maybe a desk or a table and these spider webs, you know, like here's a tack and, you know, this goes over here. And that must have been eye-opening for you, but also upsetting. And where did the time go? Like there was just such a loss of time with your family.
Well, you know, when you're in this type of relationship, you can't help but feel embarrassment and grief and rage and anger. Like, why did this happen? Like, what, for me, I lost my mother, and then I discovered that who my father really was. And it was like, what? Like, what did I do to deserve this? And the hard answer is it has nothing to do with you. This person has a documented mental disorder. They can't see what they're doing. I held out hope for years. I kept going back to him and, going forward with a relationship where I never got an apology. He never took responsibility for his actions. And I kept trying to make it work. And I thought, why? Like, I look back now, why did I do that? Well, I did it because we always want to see the best in someone. And we want to believe that this is my father. I didn't want to end this relationship. I wanted to have a father. But he can't be the person that I thought he was. He can't be the person that my mother showed me he was.
There is so much truth in that with what you just said. And hope is one of those eternal, intangible type of objects. We always hold out hope. You always hoped that you would have this relationship.
Yeah.
And I think when you bring something to the table, when another person does not see what they've done in the relationship, everybody sees it clearly, but this person.
Right.
And that's only not upsetting, it's maddening.
Yes.
And holding out hope. Sometimes hope has to go in the bucket. Like, that's where it needs to stay, because if somebody can't come to the table and say to me, whomever is listening to this podcast, if you don't have the guts to stand up and take some responsibility in what has transpired, I have hope, but I cannot have it for you because you've taken enough. And that's a hard pill for them to swallow. We can go on.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt.
Oh, no, the hurt does stay with you. I will tell you that. And, it rears its head just like grief does at the most inopportune moments, but you do not control that.
No, we don't. We don't. So you've written this book. Does your father know that you've written this book?
I believe so, but we are no contact at this point.
Right.
And I've realized so many things since writing the book. I've realized that when I used to have an encounter with him, whether it was him calling me or seeing him in person, I would have so much anxiety about the encounter. Sometimes I would have, gastrointestinal pain. Sometimes I would have a terrible headache. One time my eyes swelled and I thought, I'm having a visceral reaction to the idea of being in the same room with him. And he has no idea. Like, he was, and maybe this is true for most people that suffer from this personality disorder. They go through life pretty clueless. They think that people think very highly of them and really adore them and admire them and envy them. And so they really have no idea about anyone else's emotions or feelings. When I talk about this, I use the terminology of emotional intelligence because I think it's so important today. And I feel like we're all so much more aware. And with emotional intelligence, that's the understanding and the recognition that I have control of my own emotions, and I recognize, understand, and influence your emotions. And when we have emotional intelligence, we have mutual respect and empathy and understanding with each other. And it takes our relationship to a different level.
Mhm.
Narcissists have very low emotional intelligence.
Yes, they do. Whew.
Yeah.
Oh boy. And now with knowing everything that you know, your book came out, like I said. Have you received any feedback from that book to maybe somebody who's read it and they were like, holy crap, I wish,
I have. Thank goodness, because you write it, not necessarily in a vacuum, but you write it in the sense that you feel confident that this will provide something for people. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how gratifying it is to hear from someone else. Wow, this was exactly what I needed to read. And I have been lucky enough to get some really great reviews, both online and then people reaching out to me. That has been incredible.
And that must be so rewarding. And I think probably in a lot of ways, the hope and resiliency that maybe was lacking on different terms.
Yes. Yes. That's a very, very good observation. Yes. Agreed.
Wow. Where do you see this book taking you? Because I honestly see you on a TEDx stage.
Oh, I love you.
I love you too.
So I've been speaking to organizations, small and large, not only about how to identify toxic people and navigate them, because guess what? We all encounter difficult people at one time or another. And so they may not be full-blown narcissists, but you need to have in your skill set the ability to navigate them without harming yourself.
Mhm.
So I talk about that. I talk about learning to raise your emotional intelligence in the workplace, because I think it's so important. And I think it's how we create efficient and effective teams, and how we increase the bottom line in any kind of industry. But beyond that, I have an online course for people who maybe thought about coaching, but it's too much of a commitment, or it's too costly. And so the online course is self-guided. You do it on your own time, and it's pretty easy, and it will help you both identify toxic people and toxic relationships. And then I give you strategies if you have to coexist, and to start the healing process. I do feel that people who have suffered any kind of toxic relationship suffer some kind of PTSD on their own. And you need to recognize that. And then on top of that, I do one-on-one coaching.
That's phenomenal. And I think the healing process, we don't realize, especially if you are coexisting, or maybe in the transition of trying to get out of that coexistence, that healing process is so vital, not only for the person trying to get out, but just so they can get out in a way that they feel whole again.
I found that once I realized he had narcissistic personality disorder, that I started to make space for his mental illness. But I didn't make space for my own post-traumatic stress. And I wasn't taking care of my own mental health, because I think that's what suffers when you're in this type of relationship. We tend to be in a constant state of hypervigilance when we're in a toxic relationship. And hypervigilance is literally being on the edge of your seat, walking on eggshells all the time because we know what triggers this person or what sets them off. And we are doing our damnedest not to do that. We don't want to set them off or trigger them. But as a result, we're hyper alert. I remember saying things to my family when my father would come over for dinner. This is in the last, 12 years. And saying things to them like, hey, don't talk about that. You know how he reacts to that. Like, let's stay away from this. Like, let's not talk about politics. Like, let's not do that. Well, come on. I mean, I think I have such guilt about what I put my family through, because don't forget, when my father would stop talking to me, he stopped talking to everyone, my husband, my kids. And then when I would go back to him and say, let's just be a family again. I know you haven't talked to me or anybody in 2 years, but let's just be a family. He'd come to my house and my kids, who are now young adults, would have to pretend that that period of time never happened.
Oh, wow.
Because you can't talk about it, So I think, what did I do? I mean, I have a really incredible relationship with all three of those people, my 2 daughters and my husband. And so we talk about this a lot. We have a very transparent relationship. We talk about everything. And I have apologized because I feel like that was on me,
But for you to recognize it in such a way where you knew that what you were going through and that emotional trauma, you were almost like a transference to your husband and your 2 daughters and how they reacted to it. And obviously it sounds like it worked out in such a beautiful way that you can have these really tough discussions, because as they go on in their lives, of course, we don't want that same pattern repeated.
Right.
Like you took that opportunity to step back and, stepped up to the plate and apologized to your family. And that is beautiful on really so many different levels.
Thank you. Thank you. But, being a cycle breaker is powerful.
The cycle breaker. I like that. This morning I was chatting about, when there is a goal, if we don't put in that effort to reach a goal, how can we expect the outcome that they want, that I want, or that somebody would want? What do you think that means to you in terms of, you've been liberated, you've written this book, you have provided a guide, you've heard the feedback from all that. Where do you see this going for you now? Obviously with your one-on-one coaching, like, what is the next big thing for you?
I think, I know I feel some kind of obligation to share that wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see someone going through the same type of relationship, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but I know the signs and I want to share it with them so that they can recognize that healthy relationships do exist and that they're not caught up in that cycle where they end up with the same type of person because they think that's who's attracted to them. So I have been very lucky to have clients who came to me for help. And I feel so good that I'm able to share that with them and put them on that path to both healing and recognizing what's healthy. So for me, I hope I can continue to do that. I would love to expand and reach more people and help more people. Would you believe that on Facebook alone, there are more than 100 people, more than 1 million people in narcissistic abuse support groups that are on Facebook. More than 1 million people. Now, that's only the people that said, hey, I want to be in this group. There are a lot of people out there that either don't want to admit it or don't want to talk about it because of the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
or that feel trapped in that relationship. So like, I'm shocked. That was the biggest shock for me, was that here I was going through this, and that
Mhm.
there were so many other people out there who were experiencing the same type of thing.
I can't even fathom that. Well, first of all, I'm glad that there is support group for them where they can meet together in a safe environment. But you would never think going into that there are so many people.
Yes. Yes. Unbelievable.
And I am just floored in a way there there has to be. I'm glad that there is, but I'm floored that there has to be that type of a situation.
Right.
But on the path to recovery, that can be so liberating and such a beautiful thing as well. Wow.
I'm quite confident that my daughters will not date people or be in a relationship with people who suffer from this disorder after growing up in the same house as me.
Well, they have a smart mama for sure. And
Thank
Lynn, when somebody goes to listen to this podcast, whether they're watching it on YouTube, whether they're listening to it on iHeartRadio, they can hear your voice, they can hear your passion, they can maybe even see you. I want you to look into the camera, say something that maybe you wish somebody had said to you. Like, what are maybe a tip that you look back now and say, oh my gosh.
I would like anyone that is in a relationship with a narcissist or in any kind of toxic, emotionally abusive relationship right now to know that you are not alone, and you did nothing to deserve this. This is not your fault. But please know that there are resources out there, and that you need to talk to someone. You need to protect your mental and emotional health.
Thank you so much for that, Lynn.
Thank you.
Your story is not only inspiring, I know that it is going to continue to inspire others. And I can't thank you enough for your wisdom, your candidness, being real, being authentic, and more importantly, sharing that very sensitive story. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it with your listeners.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I hope that you definitely will consider coming back. But before we sign off, can you tell everyone what is the best way to reach out to you?
Please follow me on all social media platforms. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. It's at Lynn Catalano Speaks. And also, please visit my website, www.lynncatalano.com. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You heard Lynn's passion. You heard her voice. Let that be the motivation for you that inspires you to take action in your life, because that is a big deal. That is a story that you should be congratulated for, that you're doing something for yourself. These are stories that inspire us. My name is Janice. Today, I was inspired by Lynn Catalano. And Lynn Catalano speaks. She not only speaks, she speaks. Thank you, everyone. And remember, if you have a story to share, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that all of Lynn's information is in the show notes.
Thank you.
You are amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.